Hey everybody, this is Chewy Plays Nintendo, and I want to talk about the trees in Animal Crossing New Horizons. Before we get too far though, you better believe I'm gonna ask you to stretch your limbs out and scroll over to that subscribe button. It'll prove fruitful in your quest to get more Animal Crossing content. If you've listened to our podcast at all, you know that I'm a huge fan of the trees in Animal Crossing, specifically the cedar trees. I've told stories about how disappointed I was when I found out I couldn't grow cedar trees around my home in New Leaf because it was on the southern half of the map. Seriously, I was about a month into my town and I was so close to restarting just because I couldn't have my dream of living near a mountainous river with cedar trees. I got close, but I didn't want to start from ground zero after a month. Luckily, I still have that town to this day. I never restarted it. On the podcast, I've also talked about how we haven't really seen cedar trees grow below the cliffs in New Horizons footage so far. In fact, we haven't really seen cedar trees mixed in the landscape with the other trees at all. I guess officially they're called oak tree style trees. I don't know. I just call them the fruit tree design. But regardless, at least we haven't seen them directly next to each other. We have seen them from time to time in scenes together, but they've been separated by the cliffs. Today, I'm going to take a look at that and talk about how trees have grown in previous games in the past. I'm also going to talk about this new feature that allows us to move trees. So let's get started with a bit of history. I started playing Animal Crossing on the GameCube. Population growing introduced me to the wonderful world of Animal Crossing. One thing I'm always impressed with when I go back to that game is how wild the landscape felt. It may have had to do with the acre system and seeing the camera move from acre to acre to discover new secrets hidden behind the trees, but the placement of the trees themselves was always really impressive. One thing no other Animal Crossing game has captured since it was the freedom around tree growth. You could find trees in such peculiar places around your town. Why were these places peculiar? Well, Animal Crossing has some pretty strict rules about where trees are capable of growing. In this game, you could see them growing next to fences and rivers and right next to places you'd never see them grow in future games. It really added to that wild feeling that we moved into a world that was filled with wild animals just trying to live their lives. I always loved walking to the northern portion of town near the train tracks and seeing the trees growing right up against the fence. I know it's a tiny detail, but I've always appreciated it. I feel it's truer to real life where trees can grow in all sorts of places that feel more integrated with man-made structures. I wanted this feature to come back in New Horizons, and it appears that it has. During the run of the first trailer, somebody pointed out to me that a cedar tree was suspiciously close to the cliff. In the scene with Eunice and Freya talking while the character builds a snow person, we can see a tree to the right of the house growing right next to the cliff. Not only that, we're seeing trees next to rivers and right on the water's edge of the ocean, and even tucked in close to rocks on the beach. The most recent Nintendo Live gave us a new image that showed a palm tree practically on the water. Looking back at the footage we've gotten, this doesn't seem like a mistake at all. It seems like we'll be able to see trees grow in all sorts of places. At least I hope so. There have always been some strange limitations to growing trees. There have been limits to how many trees could grow in an acre. Even Wild World had these types of limits, even though the acres were invisible in that game. The limit that has plagued me throughout my years of playing New Leaf was that cedar trees only grew in the northern half of the map. This seems to be the case in every game apparently. Cedar trees are locked to the top half of the map, even in New Horizons. Initially, this had me worried. I didn't want the same fate that plagued me in New Leaf to get me again in New Horizons. I need to have cedar trees around my home. However, we saw something wonderful in the first trailer. We saw the character dig up a tree. While that scene was initially very confusing and mysterious to us, the second trailer footage did confirm that we would indeed be able to uproot trees and move them to another location. This tells me a lot of things. For one, there may still be hard limits on where trees can be grown. Once they're grown, however, we can probably move them anywhere on the island. Even if we can't grow a cedar tree below the cliff, there may be the opportunity to move it below the cliff. I don't see why the team would focus so much on freedom to place any item anywhere on the island and then limit us on the trees. It seems like the obvious thing to allow us to do. Regardless, I've seen some comments here and there of people who feel this newfound power gives players too much control over the world. I personally really love it and am definitely going to be using it when I work on my island. I am going to get cedar trees around my house no matter what. But let me know how you feel. I know this was a video about trees, but it's Animal Crossing, and I know us fans are passionate about every little detail of the game. It may seem weird from the outside, but at least we can appreciate the small things. Anyways, let me know what you think. Please be sure to leave a comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you all next week. Bye!